Hello everyone, this is Amy Board and I am the host of Ask the Expert. And before we get into our regular scheduled programming, I just wanted to take a minute to address the unprecedented time that we find ourselves in. This global pandemic is extraordinary and I have found it to be extremely overwhelming. The news changes by the minute, and what is most unnerving, at least to me, is just this vast unknown that we are all facing. So from all of us at Bloodstream Media, we want to extend our deepest support and our encouragement at this time. And while we hope we can provide education and be a resource for you, we also hope that we can provide something that is listenable and has entertainment value and maybe even some escapism for you and your family who are hopefully staying home in the midst of this crisis. We will get through this together, and I'm pleased to let you know, if you haven't seen already, that there are already tremendous resources out there available for some of these unknown questions about the coronavirus and how it might impact, in particular, the bleeding disorder community. If you have not checked them out already, please give a listen to Bloodstream, subscribe to Bloodstream. Patrick has done some episodes recently with physicians in particular, and also the COO of the National Hemophilia Foundation, Don Rodolini, about coronavirus and what we can anticipate in the days and weeks to come. And I'm also pleased to let you know that both CEOs of our national organizations, the National Hemophilia Foundation and the Hemophilia Federation of America, have released statements, and they also participated in a webinar together on Friday, March 20th, which was this past Friday. If you have not heard about that, I do believe that you could find a copy somewhere where they have answered your questions. So I know that these resources are continuing to spill out into the community. Please stay informed, follow any type of social media feed that you trust, NHF, HFA, Bloodstream Media, Believe Limited, and we will get through this together. Today's episode features a young adult in our community, and I can't help but think at this time that listening to stories of our community members, regardless of their age, is something that can be harnessed for inspiration and continued education at a time when many of us are wondering what we can do, how we can step up, and how we can continue having a community while all of us are so isolated at home. I'm so excited for you to be introduced to this young man who created a website for his peers, young people, to share their stories online so they can feel less isolated. And in this time when all of us are feeling very sheltered, very alone, what a wonderful message that we can utilize technology to continue to build relationships and our community. So from all of us here at Bloodstream Media, we wish you the best, and we will continue to be the leading voice here in our bleeding disorder community. Please enjoy the latest episode of Ask the Expert. Thanks, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Getting to Know the Expert, a bonus episode of the Ask the Expert podcast. Today, we get to hear a little bit of the personal story of our expert from this week. Brian Ragaishis is from Live Smart, Play Smart, the website he created for teenagers to share their stories with rare disease. We are so excited to dive into Brian's personal story, a bit of why he created this website and what it was like for him personally growing up with von Willebrands disease. Before we get into it, make sure to subscribe to Bloodstream and Ask the Expert. And again, I'd always love your questions and your thoughts for future podcasts. So you can find me through email would be the best at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. So let's get into it. I am so excited for you to hear a little bit about what it was like like, what it is still like through his teenage years. One of the things that I was most struck by was he had the ability to be aware that his friends when he was younger, in particular in middle school, wasn't able to hold a conversation when it came to his von Willebrand's disease. I think that isolated him even more. I think that grew a bit of his loneliness in terms of not having people being able to understand. He was thirsty for community. He didn't have community. At the time, he didn't know that his local chapter was available to him. And so through some of these experiences, I think he decided to build this online community for other teenagers to be able to share their stories. And we get in a little bit of why does it feel necessary? Why does it feel important and valuable and critical to be able to share, to be able to be transparent with what it's like living with a bleeding disorder? Why is that important, especially to a teenager? So I'm so excited that you guys are going to be with us. Let's have ourselves another conversation. I'm your host, Amy Board, and welcome to the Getting to Know the Expert episode of the Live Smart, Play Smart, Ask the Expert podcast. Brian, welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're thrilled to get this opportunity to hear more of your personal story with VWD. So you were diagnosed around 8-9 years old. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what led to that diagnosis?
One night.
He has this great smile. I wish everybody could see this smile. So I think we're going to get a great story.
It's a bit of a gruesome story.
Yes.
One night, it was around 2 a.m. and I had been getting frequent nosebleeds in the middle of the night for as long as I can remember. I knew what to do when I had a bloody nose during the middle of the night. I would pinch my nose, go wake up my dad. We'd sit on the couch, trying to get it to stop. And I remember I was sitting on the couch with my dad, pinching my nose. We were watching George Lopez or something like that. And I blinked and my eyes got really blurry. I was kind of confused. I tried to blink it away, but it just kept getting more and more blurry. So I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, my eyes are kind of blurry." The look on his face he was just shocked. So he brought me into the bathroom and I had no idea what was going on. He woke up my mom. They started taking cotton balls and dabbing at my eyes. And then the cotton balls were red. The next day I realized I was bleeding out of my eye sockets. And so we went to the doctor, ran some blood tests, and that was when I found out that I had von Willebrand's.
Oh my goodness. Have you heard of anything like that similar in the von Willebrand's community?
Nothing similar like that.
Oh
no.
My gosh, I haven't either. Oh, I wish your dad was here. Oh my goodness, how terrifying. What was the testing like?
It was the first time I had ever had blood drawn. So it was a little nerve-wracking. I got really lightheaded. I was looking at my brother and sister who were sitting in the hallway, and they were also scared. So I kind of wanted to prove to them that I was tough. So, I kept it together.
What did it feel like to have kind of the diagnosis and the initial treatment plan? What did it work? What was that like in your household?
To me, I was only 8 years old. I didn't really see any difference between how I was living before and after the diagnosis. I knew that I had this disease that made me bleed more, but that's kind of the extent of my knowledge. And I had been living with it for my whole life up until that point and through that point. So nothing really changed in terms of the way I lived my life. Although I guess I was just a little bit more cautious. I think I played baseball or I played some sport back then. So I was a little bit more cautious with how I played, but nothing really changed that much. I knew how to handle my bleeds.
After the diagnosis and after you got a treatment regimen, what were the bleeding episodes like? Were they more managed? Was it something that you could handle?
It was always something that I could handle. I would just go tell my parents and we would handle it together. And I feel like when I was diagnosed, I kind of got more familiar with how to handle it myself. If they were particularly bad bleeds, I would still go to my parents and I would take medication. But for the most part, I learned how to handle it more on my own, and I think that was really helpful.
I take it when you started playing more competitive sports when you got older, things became on the forefront of your mind more. Is that fair to say? What was that like as you started playing soccer?
When I'm playing soccer, I always have to tell myself to remember that I have this condition, because sometimes it's really easy to get sucked into the game and forget about it. I always remind myself to kind of be cautious when I'm playing and prioritize my safety over everything else. And typically, soccer isn't the biggest contact sport, so typically I'm all right. But when I'm going in for a header that's heavily contested, I typically have to, in that split second, remind myself I probably shouldn't do that.
Does it freak your mother out?
Does it freak my mother out?
She's in the room with us right now. She's smiling.
I think my mom trusts me and trusts my judgment, and trusts that I know what to do if something were to ever happen. So maybe it used to freak her out more, but hopefully it doesn't anymore.
You know, this community, our bleeding disorder community, as much as we welcome both hemophilia and von Willebrands disease, I think I can gather that it must be frustrating for our folks living with VWD that the conversations of new and innovative treatments tend to steer towards hemophilia. You know, a lot of the education is around hemophilia. Von Willebrands is a much trickier science. We just don't know enough about it. And so I think it must be frustrating being a teenager, knowing that you have this, you know, community of teenagers, being not only a von Willebrands patient, but a male von Willebrands patient. What is that like in that group, in your circle of peers? What is that like?
I think, you know, von Willebrands may be a trickier science, and more of the education is steered toward hemophilia. But these hemophiliacs and von Willebrands patients go through a lot of the same experiences. So I think as long as the funding is going towards research in some sort of bleeding disorder, you know, I can sympathize with people who have hemophilia. So as long as I know that their condition is getting funding, I'm okay with it. You know, I don't really wish that they would take funding out of hemophilia to go into von Willebrands, because I feel like I'd be taking something from them. But that being said, I do think that the conversation should be opened up to include von Willebrands more, just because everybody that I've spoken to is mostly focused on hemophilia, and it's not a huge issue, but I do think we should be a part of the conversation, and hopefully we can get more funding for research in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about going off to college, what are some of your concerns and hesitancies about managing, you know, your VWD when you're away from home?
My main concern is that I've never had to manage it alone. My parents have always been in there with me. Even if I can deal with a bleed on my own, they're still there in case they need to help with anything. So I guess it's a little bit scary going to college, but within the first month that I'm there, I'm assuming that I'll have talked to my roommate about von Willebrands, maybe some other people on my floor, any friends that I made, so that if anything were to go wrong, they know enough about the condition to help me.
You spoke a little bit last episode about being isolated when you were first diagnosed, and kind of that, I'm sure that middle school part of life, as for all of us, was a treat. What was that like, being isolated, and how did you try to tell friends? What was that like, trying to explain your von Willebrands to your peers?
In middle school, I wasn't surrounded by the most supportive crowd.
Everybody's smiling in the room. Everybody. Brutal.
I mean, I had a close group of friends, but besides that, I wasn't really close with the other people in my school. So I would try to talk to my close group of friends about it, and they listened to me, but I don't think that they really cared too much about what I had to say about it, because I had never gotten a bleed while I was around them. And so they didn't really see it as a super important issue. And I didn't really have anybody to talk to about what I was going through. All my friends wanted to talk about other things. They never really held a conversation about von Willebrands. And that changed when I moved into high school, when I started learning more about it, learning more about the community, and my friends matured. They learned how to talk about things that made them uncomfortable, and I thought that was really important.
Oh, I love that phrase. They never held a conversation about von Willebrands. I could imagine that you were very lucky that you had friends that matured. Some of us don't have friends that are mature. JK. But what would you, I don't know, what would your encouragement be to other teenagers or young people that are listening to this podcast that are surrounded by people that aren't holding conversations about their bleeding disorder, and how hard that must be to not be heard? What would your encouragement be to them?
I would tell them to get involved in their chapter, because it's a large community of people who are going through the same things that you're going through, who know what you want to talk about and will hold a conversation with you. And they're going to listen to you, and they're going to sympathize with you. And to any person who's, end of elementary school, middle school, that's really important, because at that age, you're not going to find a lot of people who want to talk about it that don't have the disease. So I think the community is definitely the best resource to go to if you do want to talk about that.
That's great. Do you have people you look up to in the bleeding disorder community? Do you have some heroes that you think do it right and hold those conversations? Do you have some heroes?
One person that I really look up to is Chris Bombardier. His whole story of climbing all the summits, especially Everest, is really inspiring, because he has this disorder where people tell you you're not supposed to do physical activity. And rather than just sitting at home all day, he found a way to incorporate activity into his life while also staying safe.
That's pretty cool. I'm fighting really hard. I want to FaceTime him right now and have him join this conversation, but he's working, and we'll do that later. Tell me about your hope for your generation of kids with bleeding disorders. What do you long to see the community turn into?
First, I just hope for more awareness. I want to be able to say, I have von Willebrands, and not hear somebody respond, "What's that?" Because I've never gotten, besides when talking to people who also have von Willebrands or have hemophilia, everybody says, "What is that? I don't know what that is." So that's the first thing I want, is for people to kind of recognize it. And the second thing, I guess, is just more funding for research and treatment, because a lot of kids with von Willebrands and hemophilia are going through these experiences that they shouldn't be going through. No kid deserves to be going through what they're going through. I think through funding more research and getting better treatment plans, we'll be able to prevent that.
It's really great. I can imagine Live Smart, Play Smart, your website, will be a tool for bringing more awareness. So this is exciting. Let's get it out there. Brian, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I thank you for telling your story. This episode is going to drop during Bleeding Disorders Awareness Week. And so my last question is about awareness, about activism. What does it mean to you? What do you hope that you can accomplish here in your next 4 years in school and going forward?
Awareness and activism to me kind of just means embracing who I am and getting other people to know more about me and about my experiences and about the experiences of so many others. By advocating for bleeding disorders and spreading awareness, hopefully we can get the funding that we need into the research of these diseases.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. And from all of us at Bloodstream Media, from Brian and I, we just want to wish everyone a happy Bleeding Disorders Awareness Month. Get on social media, let the word out. Please contact Brian at Live Smart, Play Smart to share your story. He'll be waiting for your email. And that is all for episode 37 of the Ask the Expert podcast series. We'll be back next month with another expert interview.